What is up, my Shadowverse soldiers, and welcome back to another Shadowverse Evolve video. Alright, soldiers, we are here on our last video slash last deck for our Shadowverse Evolve X Vanguard collab deck, and I'm very excited to talk about this one. Unfortunately, it isn't the best version to play out of the collab set, which is one of the things that we will be talking about in the pros and cons for it, of course. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this video and start talking about this new deck. Alright, so if you didn't already know what deck we were going to be talking about in this video, we're going to be talking about Pale Moon. And Pale Moon is kind of like the circus-esque of like the Vanguard universe. And we're going to be seeing ourselves using cards from a banner zone to be putting into our regular field area. And they're going to get their fanfares and their stuff to go off. So we're going to be moving multiple parts in this deck. And that's one thing you personally have to get used to when playing Runecraft, is you're going to have to be moving multiple parts because it's not really straightforward. So you're going to be pulling cards out of your banish zone being played, and then when you play those cards, their fanfares are going to go off. And then sometimes you're going to have to move cards from our cemetery into our banish zone, and then, from the banish zone onto our field. Alright, but enough of me rambling about Pale Moon. Let's talk about the pros and cons for the deck. Alright, so for the pros, we have decent burn, storm damage, late game, and wide board, and then on the cons, we have banish restriction, no finishers, small bodies, and then not the best of Vanguard. Alright, so going off with our first pro, we have decent burn. So the best type of damage in SVE, in my opinion, is just burn damage, just because there's no interaction, and you're able to just go ahead and play a card and then do the damage, unless there's another requirement that says that on the card. You're just playing a card and then burning them. And of course, we have another form of damage. Of course, we enjoy when we're able to play our cards and absolutely swing with them. So there is Storm in the deck as well. So there are little small bodies that are able to be played, and then they can swing the same turn. And then there are some instances where you can play two cards and one of the other cards gives your follower Storm. Alright, so some of you soldiers may disagree with me on this next point here, and I honestly do think the deck has some decent late game. So when we do get into our boss monster and we're able to play our free cards and they get their fanfare effects as well, I think that's just a huge plus, just because we're able to be in the late game and have some recovery. Because there are decks that are just like, maybe like Dragoncraft, where you do have late game, but your late game means, okay, you're suffering in hand size some way, or you're playing big bodies. Well, when you get into late game with this deck, you'll actually be able to do a very big recovery on your hand size, or be able to have a nice little board on field that your opponent has to answer. Alright, and that leads us into our last point with the wide board. So this deck can build a board pretty quick, so if you don't have the removal, then they're able to play two cards the very next turn, and you're definitely going to get outpaced. So do watch out for it when you play against this deck and you don't have the removal on maybe like turns 3, turns 4, because they're being able to play like two bodies once they get into turns 4 and onwards. And then when we get into those later game turns, then we're going to be playing like maybe 3+ bodies. Alright, and then moving over into our cons. So we have our first con is banished restriction. Alright, so of course we have our other crafts that have those niches that sure enough say, hey, if you have combo 3, if you're in overflow, or if you have 10 cards in your cemetery, well, in this deck you need to have a banishment requirement of 5. So you need to make sure you have those 5 cards in the banish area before you're able to do most of your things with your cards. And then next up, we have no finishers. So there's no big boss monster to really close the game out. We're going to be using most of our other cards to really ping away at an opponent. And there's no big finisher for the deck. So unfortunately, this deck does not have one of those. And of course, next up, we have small bodies. So of course, these followers that are going to be spamming the board aren't going to be very big in terms of defense. So they're going to be dealt with very easily. But the best thing about that is that they will be moved from the cemetery into the banish area if we want them to, through, a couple card skills. And then of course, we can be playing cards from our banish area into our field again. So we can kind of like cycle our things, but that still means that our bodies aren't very big. Alright, and lastly but not least, we have not the best of Vanguard. So unfortunately, this is probably not the best deck to play. I don't really want to say the worst because, the deck still pilots. I would say the worst decks on Shadowverse Evolve aren't able to be piloted just because there's not enough engine. or there's like a keyword that's missing that, you know, isn't out of the game yet. So I will say that isn't the best out of the Vanguard collab set if you're really interested in looking to play something that you can really beat somebody with. Now, I will say it is a fun deck. I highly recommend if you are playing for casual and playing for fun, I would highly recommend picking up this deck. Alright, so let's talk about our legendaries for the deck we will be using. Alright, and the first card we're looking at is Purple Trapezist, so she's a 2-cost 2/3. You can choose one of the two modes on her fanfare. You can either 1, draw a card and then banish a card from your hand, or 2, select a Pale Moon follower on your field, and if there are at least 5 cards in your banish zone, you can give it Storm. So I will say that this is a very important card for your deck to be pushing a lot of damage. So of course, you know, playing her in turn 2 will be helpful, so you can go ahead and start putting cards into your banish area. And then on top of that, having that second ability, so when we're going to be playing cards from our banish zone, she's going to be one of the cards we're going to be choosing because we want to give all our followers Storm as fast as possible. Alright, and then next up we have Nightmare Doll Alice, so she's a 3-cost 3/3. You can evolve her from 1 and she has Twin Drive, so she drive checks twice, but when she comes into play you banish the top card of your deck. If there are at least 5 cards in your banish zone, you draw a card. So of course, keeping a tempo while spending 2 and then spending 3 to being able to banish the top card of our deck, which might be unfortunate because if we banish a card that we're not able to get back, it'll be pretty harmful. But going ahead and filling up that banish area is what we're going to be doing through turns 1 through 4. And then looking at Nightmare Doll's Evo, so she turns to a 4/4 and she still has the Twin Drive, but on evolve you can choose one. You can select a Pale Moon follower that costs 2 or less in our banish zone and then summon it, or we can 2, spend 4 extra play points to select a Pale Moon follower in our banish zone and then summon it. Alright, so on the first evolve effect, we're going to honestly be getting Purple Trapezist, so we can have those 5 cards in our banish zone to give it Storm. That's going to be the optimal play when evolving the Nightmare Doll Alice, while having the drive check to being able to check the top 2 to getting those drive check effects, which will be helping us because we'll be putting those Pale Moon followers into our cemetery, which we can put them into the banish zone. And then of course we have our ult ability, which is going to be a total of 8 play points, so of course if we're going to be paying 8 play points, we're going to be playing the next card we're actually going to be talking about. Alright, and lastly, we have our boss monster, which is our 7-cost 5/5. She has Russian Twin Drive, so she's able to drive check twice. When she comes into play, you select up to 1 Pale Moon follower that costs 4 or less, and then up to 1 that is 3 or less, and up to 1 that is 2 or less in your banish zone, and then you summon them. And that's exactly what I mean. You're going to be filling up the board. So by turn 7, your entire board is going to be filled. You have 4 cards that you're going to be choosing from. Of course, we're going to want to get Purple Trapezist, of course, just to give another follower Storm. And then, of course, we can play another Purple Trapezist if we want to, along with another card to give another card Storm as well. So we'll be swinging in for a lot of damage on turn 7. So of course we have the option of choosing the starter amulets from the other starter decks, but of course we will have to go with the actual rune starter amulet for the Pale Moon deck, just because when you have a Pale Moon follower on field, you can go ahead and draw a card and then send a card from your hand to the banished area. Alright, so here are the triggers for the deck. So the triggers are actually going to be pretty helpful, so we're going to want to run at least 3 of the critical ones just because they're so good. And speaking of the critical trigger, we will talk about Dynamite Juggler, so it's the 2-cost 2/3, so we can banish the top card of our deck, and if we have at least 5 cards in our banish zone, we deal 2 damage to each enemy leader. And of course, this is a card that we're definitely going to want to see either through doing drive checks or seeing it later in the game, or just after we have those 5 cards in our banished area, just so we can deal 2 damage in a way. Alright, then next up we have Rainbow Magician. So this is the other card that's going to be helping us get cards out of our banished area and switching them around. So he's a 2-cost 3/2. When he comes into play, you select the Pale Moon card in your banish zone, add it to your hand, and then you banish the card from your hand. And of course we have the other 2 trigger cards, which aren't too crazy in the deck, but you know, are very helpful if you manage to do them, like the Candy Cloud is pretty good on tempo, and then if you want to restand to do some more removal, Sky High Walker isn't a bad card either. Alright, so here are going to be the cards that are going to be helping us put cards into the banished area for real cheap so we can keep tempo, and I think these are the ones that you should be looking at. Alright, so we're looking at our first card, Jumping Jill, so it's a 1-cost 2/2, and you can ride her for 3, but on drive you select up to 1 Pale Moon card in your banished zone, and then add it to your hand and give this follower +1/+1. And when she comes into play, you banish the top 2 cards of your deck. So it's nice to keep tempo and on turn 1 being able to banish the top 2 cards, and then, you know, cracking your amulet to go ahead and get 3 cards into your banish zone on turn 1 is very good. But however, on the other hand, you know, there is this ride ability where you can spend the extra 3 to get another Pale Moon follower from your banished area into your hand to turn this into a 3/3. I know that's not going to come up too often, but I think that's an ability you can look at if you need it. Alright, and then next up we have Dark Metal Bicorns with a 1-cost 2/2. It's another goblin, but you can engage him to draw a card and then banish a card from your hand. So of course not another bad turn 1 play. I think other people are going to go for Jumping Jill on turn 1 just because you're going to go ahead and put the top 2 into the banished area, and that'll help you, you know, get your game plan going a lot faster. But Dark Metal Bicorn isn't a bad second choice. Alright, then next up we have Skull Juggler. So this is going to be the other card that really shapes up the rest of your turn 2 to really get the rest of those cards in the banished area. So for 1, you can use it as a spell card to select 2 Pale Moon cards in your cemetery, you banish them, and then you draw a card. Alright, so a reminder, soldiers, that our starting amulet is a Pale Moon card as well. So as long as we use our Pale Moon starting amulet, and then if they answer either a Jumping Jill or a Dark Metal Biothorn on turn 1, then we're able to go ahead and use this on turn 2, and we actually might already have the requirements. Alrighty, then lastly we have the Crimson Beast Tamer, which is a pretty good card to help, at least +1 while also doing your game plan. So she's a 4-cost 3/3, she has Ward, and then you banish a Pale Moon card from her hand and then you draw 2 cards. So being able to just draw on 1 card is very nice, and then her evolution ability, which I can't forget about, to turn her into a Barking Manticore is going to be good removal, which we will be talking about soon. Alright, so these are the cards that we're going to be looking at in terms of removing our opponent's cards when playing the Pale Moon deck. Alright, so looking at Mistress Hurricane, so it's a 2-cost 3/2, so if there are at least 5 cards in your banish zone, you can give this follower Storm. You can also engage to banish this card. You can select enemy follow on field and then deal it 3 damage. So mind you, keeping tempo is always good, but having those 5 cards in the banished area to swing for 3 damage with Storm is actually pretty vital in this deck. And also on top of that, having this engage ability to take care of any follower that has at least 3 or less defense is also nice too in tempo. And then next up we have Golden Beast Tamer, which is a 4-cost 4/4. When she comes into place like the Pale Moon follower that costs 2 or less in your banish zone and then you summon it, you can also engage to select enemy follower on the field and then deal it damage equal to the number of Pale Moon followers on your field. Alright, so throughout the video we've looked at lots of 2-cost Pale Moon followers that are pretty helpful, like Mistress Hurricane, or other cards like Purple Trapezes that are 2-cost that we can be doing their fanfare effects to go ahead and, selecting followers to give them Storm, or it's Self-Gathering Storm, or we can look at the other 2 cards that are going to either be doing damage or healing us and whatnot. Alright, so looking at the Barking Manticore, so it's a 4/4 on the evolve and it has Ward and Twin Drive, but on evolve you can select enemy from the field and deal it 4 damage. Alright, so for matching tempo with our opponent, it's not bad to turn the Crimson Beast Tamer into this Barking Manticore to go ahead and deal 4 damage, and if you manage to rush this into another follower, you're going to get that double drive check, so hopefully you can hit those drive triggers. Alright, and lastly we have Hades Hypnosis. So this is the 1-cost quick spell that is for Rune in the Vanguard class. So this is going to be like the Angelic Snipe that's just going to deal 2 damage, but if you discard the Pale Moon card, you're going to be moving the top 3 cards into the banish zone while also dealing 3 damage to a follower, which is pretty good for your game plan. Alright, so let's talk about some value. So these are some cards that are not going to be in every build for Pale Moon, but they are some way going to give you some value and tempo. Alright, so looking at Midnight Bunny, so it's a 2-cost 2/2, you can ride her for 1, but on drive you give this follower +1/+1. You look at the top 2 cards of your deck, you add one of them to your hand and then banish the other. So the personal thing that I like about this card is that you don't have to reveal what card you're adding to your hand, so that leaves the mystery of whatever you're adding to your hand, just a mystery, and then the other card going to the banished area, so make sure you choose wisely. And then on top of that, we get a 3/3 on the board to swing into something while she also has the drive point under her, so she has single drive, so we can do a drive check. Alright, then next up we have Turquoise Beast Tamer. So she's a 2-cost 2/2. You can ride her for 1, but on drive you select up to 1 enemy follower on the field and then deal it 2 damage, and you give this follower +1/+1 while also banishing the top card of your deck. So pretty good for tempo. If you have those 3 play points, or if you have the 2 in the evolution point, you can go ahead and give her that ride, deal 2 damage to something, and then also making her a 3/3 on board while also putting the top card into your banished area. Alright, then next up we have Nitro Juggler. So he's a 3-cost 4/4, and while there are at least 5 cards in your banish zone, this follower has Bane and Ward. When it comes into play, look at the top 5 cards of your deck. You may banish up to 2 of them and then put the rest at the bottom of your deck in any order. So personally, what I really like about Nitro Juggler is that the Bane and Ward isn't going to come up too often, because most of the time our opponent is just going to remove things before swinging into this. But if the situation does come up and our opponent has to swing into this, they're going to be losing those followers that are swinging into it. But I really do like how it's a 3-cost 4/4. Alright, so personally, I couldn't think about any other tech for the deck because most of the cards really just help with the game plan and they aren't really like tech heavy like, the other classes we've looked at. But I think Powers Converge is still a good card to slide into your deck to go ahead and choose one of the 3 modes, or do all 3 of them if you have those 3 drive points. Alright, so getting into the grade of the deck. So of course we're going to look at a sample build that's on the website on the recommended deck section for the Vanguard class. And then we'll also look at another build that I've looked and just compared through other lists that happened in JP. Alright, so looking at the Pale Moon deck, so this is the sample build that's on the website. I'd highly recommend you check it out. I think it's pretty nice. Of course, you can move some ratios around if you need to out of your sample build, but I think looking at this other deck list, you might have a little more success with. Alright, so here is a sample build myself that I kind of played around with. Of course, this is one of the topping lists, but I think I moved the ratios around myself. But this is one of the lists that you should probably take into playing. Of course, you know, I will have the deck code in the description below if you want to check that out. Or if you're using the sample build that we looked at before, I highly recommend that too, because both of these builds are pretty around the same thing. All right, so getting back into the grade of the deck. All right, so the one thing I personally don't like about this deck, so we'll just start off with the negatives there, is that you do have to reveal a whole bunch of what you are doing in the deck. Like, hey, I'm throwing this card into the banished area. The banished area is common knowledge that everyone's able to look at, so there's no real surprise in what you are going to be playing. And outside of that, if your opponent has some good knowledge, and then the answer to respond to some of your attacks, because mind you, the evolved followers that you're going to be using and swinging with the same turn are only going to have like 4 defense, and then our biggest follower that we're going to be swinging with is only 5 attack. So of course there's lots of situations where you can push a lot of damage like very early, or you know, tick 2 here or tick 3 there, and then sometimes when we get later on in the game, of course we're going to fill up our board. But once we get into like turn 7, where we're going to be playing all our cards in our boss monster, our opponent also has the window to just clear our board with like 1 card. So personally, I do believe that this deck is a B-. Now, I would kind of want to give it a B+, but I do think it is like the worst out of all the Vanguard decks to be playing, but it is still playable, so that is the best part about it. And alright soldiers, that is it for all of the Vanguard decks. We are finished with the Pale Moon, so starting tomorrow we're going to be doing the set 11 reveal, so I hope you are all there. Of course I will be marketing those videos, but I just wanted to go ahead and knock these deck breakdowns out of the way. I am so sorry that these came out so late. I was dealing with a whole bunch of life stuff, so I hope you all understand. But alrighty soldiers, that is the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. It means a lot to me that you are watching these content and these videos. I hope you are able to enjoy these videos, and if you have any insight on any other decks that you want to be informed about, let me know in the comment section. Outside of that, make sure you are safe in whatever you do tonight and safe whatever you do for the rest of the year. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.
Yeah. TRINN. Just to get you away. What I got to do, what I got to do.